Our film begins with Frank. Frank was in the middle of an argument with his wife because she found out he rented an apartment for his mistress. She knew about it because the real estate broker made a mistake and called her thinking she was the one. Frank gets nervous and lies to her, telling her he was planning a surprise and that he gave her a new apartment for their anniversary. She actually believes him and they end the call. After that, Frank calls the broker and argues with him about the mistake. Frank was standing under a building where people are installing a new air conditioner. He is shocked when he sees the air conditioner about to fall on him, so he avoids it and runs quickly into the street. Suddenly, a bus hits him and he dies and turns into a ghost. He sees people passing through him and becomes very pissed and enraged that this happened to him. Later on, we see Dr. Bertram Pincus, who works as a dentist. We notice that he doesn't like to talk much, to the point that when his colleague tries to engage in conversation, he responds with just a word or two at most. Bertram goes to his apartment, and when he gets on the elevator, he sees Gwen, Frank's wife, carrying many things and asks him to hold the elevator until she gets in, but he closes it and goes to his apartment. Then he heads to the hospital for a minor surgery. The next day, he was discharged from the hospital, and before leaving, he talks to the nurse and asks her about the people who were in the room yesterday, but she tells him she doesn't know anything about what he's talking. After leaving the hospital, he was very surprised to see the nurses standing and smoking cigarettes. He talks to a nurse standing alone and tells her that he's surprised by what the nurses are doing. She's surprised that he can see her and that he talks to her, following him all the way. Bertram apologizes to two elders he accidentally bumped into, and they're also surprised that he can see them. They walk behind him with the nurse and another group of people, including Frank. Bertram was shocked when a guy in a car passed through him from behind. Bertram rushes quickly back to the hospital and talks to the doctor, telling her that he has been having hallucinations since the operation. The doctor gets tense, and when she looks at his files, she finds out that he died for 7 minutes during the operation and came back to life due to an anesthesia error. Bertram gets angry and demands to see the anesthesiologist immediately, but the doctor informs him that he was terminated because this was his third mistake. When he tells him that he will file a lawsuit against them, the doctor informs them that he signed a letter that drops his right to file any lawsuits against them. But Bertram doesn't seem to remember anything from this. After that, he leaves the hospital and sees Frank passing through him, leaving him amazed at what just happened. Afterwards, he took the taxi that Gwen was waiting for, only to find Frank sitting next to him, informing him that the person with whom he just took her place in the taxi is his widow. Then they go to the bar, and there Bertram tells Frank about what happened during the surgery. Frank lets him know that he will be seeing many ghosts these days and they won't disappear until he fulfills the request of those who died before achieving them. While they're talking, a ghost of an old lady appears, asking him to reconcile her daughters. Bertram was shocked, so he went home with Frank following him. Frank told him that his widow would marry a sleazy lawyer who wanted to take her money within 2 months. Frank tells him that he needs his help. He must intervene and prevent this marriage. The dentist, however, seems indifferent to Frank's word and heads to his apartment to sleep. But the ghosts appear to him again, demanding that he fulfill their request. He quickly dresses and leaves the apartment, meeting Frank, who tells Bertram, "I'm the one who gave them your address to come ask you for help." Bertram tries to escape from the ghosts, but they chase him everywhere. Then Frank tells him that if he helps him with his wife's situation, he won't see these ghosts again. The next day, Bertram goes with Frank to a lecture given by Gwen, his widow, on embalming and mummification. Bertram doesn't remember her at all, even though she lives in the same building and they have met several times in the elevator and taxi. He becomes interested in her during the lecture and tells Frank that he might make her love him. Frank mocks him, saying that he's not attractive enough to attract her. After the lecture, Bertram tries to talk to Gwen and apologizes for all the bad things he did, explaining that he wasn't paying attention. He tries to engage in conversation with her, but she isn't responding, and he walks away, leaving him behind. Later, Bertram exits and talks to Frank, informing him that he will help him understand his wife better. He starts telling him what his wife loves and hates. The next day, Gwen was in the elevator with Bertram and talked to him about mummies, knowing that he was a dentist, so he might know many things about mummies from their teeth. Before leaving the building, Gwen asked Bertram to go with her today to examine the mummy, hoping they might learn how she died. He agrees, then goes home to freshen up before heading to the museum with her. They look at the mummy and Gawain begins to explain its history. Bertram quickly figures out the case of the mummy's death, impressing Gawain. They then go for a walk and talk together. Gawain tells him that her tooth hurts, so he examines it in the middle of the street. Suddenly, a ghost appears, asking him to kill someone. Bertram becomes tense and asks Gawain to come to his clinic so he can check her tooth. Meanwhile, Richard, Gawain's lawyer fiancé, arrives and meets Bertram. Richard tells Bertram that his teeth hurt as well, and he invites him to dinner to check his teeth as well. Bertram accepts and Frank joins them at the dinner. During the dinner, Richard offers Bertram a job in modern dental care in developing countries, but Bertram politely declines the offer. Later, Richard receives a work call that makes him in a hurry to leave. Gwen stays with Bertram and sprays air freshener because her dog had a smell, which bothered Bertram. Gwen suggests they go for a walk to get some fresh air. Later, they go to have a drink together, and there, Gwen starts talking about Frank, explaining that she's not upset about their separation. Then Frank appears and overhears Gwen talking about him, mentioning his awful habits and worst of all, his infidelity. She reveals that she discovered his infidelity on the day he died and was very upset because she couldn't confront him or divorce him. Bertram feels sorry for her sadness. Later that night, they head back home. In the elevator, Bertram tells Gawain that his old girlfriend Sarah used to travel a lot for work, but one day she never returned. Turned out she got married to someone else. Gawain then shared with him the offer she received of going on a 6-month photography trip to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, but turned it down for Richard's sake. Then Bertram goes home and tells Frank he won't continue with the game they're playing with Gawain because she's a good person, and Richard also seems like a good match for her. Frank insists that Richard is only approaching her to get her money. Bertram says that's not true. They seem like a good couple together. That is when Frank realizes that Bertram is in love with Gawain, which makes him want to stay away from her. Days pass and Richard visits the dentist clinic because he has a problem with his tooth. There, Richard tells Bertram that he had an argument with Gawain because she decided to go on the offered trip despite his disagreement, leading to their breakup. Afterwards, Bertram sees Frank, which makes him wonder why he is still around even though Richard dumped Gawain, so his request in life has been fulfilled. Later, Pincus goes to meet Gawain and presents her with a keychain as a gift. During their conversation, he tries to get closer to her, telling her that he knows the type of gold she likes and the look she gives when she's unsure about something. Gawain gets annoyed with him and asks him how he knew that information because no one else except Frank knows it. However, he tells her that it's just a guess, nothing more. But Gawain tells him that if he doesn't speak within 10 seconds, she will leave. So Pincus tells her everything that happened to him and also tells her that Frank is in the room with them as they speak now. However, she doesn't believe him, so he tells her to ask him anything about Frank so he will answer. So she asks him about the nightmare that Frank always dreamed about. Frank lies to Pincus and tells him that he always dreams about drowning. When he says that to Gawain, he tells him that was wrong and insists on his leaving, and before leaving, Pincus tells her that he loves her, but she tells him not to contact her again. Then Bertram gets upset with Frank because of what he did to ruin his relationship with Gawain, but Frank tells him that he's a heartless, ruthless person who doesn't deserve Gawain. Bertram chose to walk in the street. He kept walking until it got dark and ghosts started to appear asking for their requests, but he didn't care about them. Days pass and he lives his life missing Gawain. One day, he talks to his colleague's doctor at work and asks him to write a prescription for sleeping pills because he's been experiencing some insomnia lately. His colleague shows him a quote by Einstein that says, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." From that moment on, Pincus decides to fulfill the request of the ghost, and they start to disappear one by one as he fulfills their request. Afterwards, he goes to Gwen's party and talks to her and lets her know that Frank's spirit is still around because she still hasn't forgiven him for what he did, so his spirit isn't freed yet. And he lets her know that Frank is here now, apologizing to her, asking forgiveness for what he did, but she still doesn't believe him. He follows her, trying to persuade her that the ghosts are real, but then he gets hit by a bus. Now, he's a ghost himself. He watches with Frank as a crowd forms and Gawain sobs over him in a shock, frightened that he might be dead. Help arrives and they give him CPR. Frank was watching how sad and worried Gawain was and realized that she loved Bertram. Frank told him about the dream Gawain asked him about earlier, which he misled Bertram with the wrong answer to, and his soul finally rested in peace with his ghost finally gone. Luckily, Bertram survives the accident, and after a while we see Gawain at Bertram's clinic welcoming him back and telling him she decided not to go on that archaeological dig business trip. He asks about her dental issue to break some ice, they laugh together, and then he tells her of Frank's real nightmare. The nightmare was Frank going into the forest with his father when he was 8 years old, and he gets lost from his father and never makes it home again. That was actually the answer Frank told him before disappearing. Bertram then assures her that Frank has found his way home. And that's it. If you like this recap, hit like, share, and subscribe to our channel to keep seeing content like this one. If you have any requests or thoughts, drop them below in the comment section, and we will see you at the next one. Peace out.